Welcome to another episode, I guess we'll call it, of Ask the Author. I am so excited to talk with all of you today about this book and this author. Christine Handy is a model. She's an author of the book Walk Beside Me. That's what we're going to be talking about today. She's also a humanitarian speaker. Christine's best-selling novel, Walk Beside Me, is in production to be a film. Christine, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I'm excited. So we're gonna do a deep dive into your book, but can you do that like elevator pitch of
Yeah.
the arm and cancer real quick to kind of orient people around your book?
Okay. So I wrote a fictional depiction of my life in my book, Walk Beside Me. And it starts with my arm. I had a debacle with my arm. I had a torn ligament in my right wrist. This is a very short version of that story because it went on for the course of a year. And I picked the Stanford grad and, the pedigree doctor. And ultimately, my arm was fused because I had a torn ligament and he fixed that part, but left an infection in my arm, which went undiagnosed, misdiagnosed for months and months. And I trusted him and didn't go see a second opinion for months and months because I was taught, to believe authority and trust doctors. And that was a big mistake. And then I ultimately, when it was figured out that I had an infection and my arm was pretty much destroyed, I flew up to New York to get a doctor who would fix my arm. Well, fix it, meaning he would fuse it with cadaver bones and a cadaver Achilles tendon and with bone grafts. And I was up in New York on my 6-week post arm fusion checkup, trying to figure out like what does my life look like now with these kids. I have sons, they're athletes, and how am I going to use my right arm? And my doctors are telling me I can't carry more than 2 pounds for the rest of my life. And how am I going to carry a purse? And how am I going to drive? And how am I going to do my chores or whatever? And then I was in a hotel in New York and I was getting ready for my appointment. And I was taking a shower with this massive cast outside of the shower. And I go to wash my body and I take this bar of soap and I wash it over my left breast and I felt a lump.
Mm.
And literally 5 days later, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. So I had gone from this thriving mother, self proclaimed athlete, model, to now being a sickly woman needing constant care and attention with my arm. And now I had breast cancer.
Oh, oh my gosh. Let's talk about that life before. And you're very honest in your book, and as you said, I'm glad you said it. So you wrote it as a novel, but it is a depiction of what happened.
Yeah.
And I love your honesty here. The truth was, I did like money. For me, wealth equaled security.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to just talk about a little bit about life life before, because it was very, very different than what you're doing now.
Yeah. So life before it didn't come without issues, right? We all do. But my dependency on accolades from society was great. And I looked to society to fill my cup up. And so, whether that was in the modeling world or whether that was relationally with certain friends or with how I chose my husband or where I wanted to live, all those things really depended on what it looked like to the outside world. And I mean, I speak about it so honestly because it's the way a lot of us live. And when that's stripped away from you, you really realize, especially when you're faced with death, like somebody tells you this is your percentile chance of survival, you go, well, what really matters really quickly? And so all those things that I had kind of built my life on, my modeling career and my marriage and my foundation with certain friends and where I lived and all those things, which, seemed kind of normal, very transactional, but seemed kind of normal to me.
Right.
That's not how I survived life. And so once I was diagnosed with cancer and once this thing happened to my arm, I slowly realized that living in a transactional world, that wasn't real life. And it shouldn't be your life. And so then I made a massive shift, not overnight, but months through my chemotherapy, where I lost my hair, I lost my beauty, I lost what I thought was my dependency, which was external. And I had to really search inside and go, well, who is this person? Like, I've lived this life for 41 years, very dependent on society. society didn't really carry me very well because I was insecure the whole time. Like, and society didn't, keep me warm at night when I, in despair. And when I had my diagnosis, and my modeling career couldn't sustain me, and anyway, all those external accolades, it didn't matter. So when I started to really slowly go, well, who are you? Like, what do you even like to do? I had no idea, because at the
Mm,
time I liked to do what my husband liked to do. I liked to do what my kids wanted to do. I liked to do what my friends wanted to do, and I liked to work, but it was kind of a controlled environment, right? I could tiptoe into the modeling world and tiptoe out. I could do the jobs that I wanted to do, but I didn't wasn't dependent on my salary.
right.
And so then I was diagnosed with cancer, and I was scarred up with my arm. And so was my modeling career over? Probably. And so then all those outside accolades started to get washed away. And I was like, do I have value in this world? I don't think so. Who will love me if I don't have my beauty? Who will love me if I don't have success? Who will love me if I don't have these outside accolades? And I just thought nobody will love me. And must not be lovable. And
So
so,
So
yeah, go ahead.
we're going to dive deep into that because what I love about your book is um, the conflict is not the right word, but things that don't seem to make sense, right? And you do a really good job of just showing both sides of everything. How someone as confident, at least from the outside as you, is beautiful. In fact, I'm just going to quote from your book. So you said, and in the book, the character's name is Willow. I presented myself a certain way to my family and to the world around me, healthy, happy Willow Adair with perfect gloss and polish, when inside my soul trembled and quaked.
Yeah.
Wow. How long had you felt that way? How
I,
long had you?
as long as I could remember.
And where do you think that comes from? You saw the notes on your book.
I know
So
you're
if
like, are you sure you meant to say this? I was like, yes.
yeah, why? I asked why like I don't know 5 times. Why? So yeah, where did that come from?
Well, the funny thing is, most of the women that I modeled with, I still have long-term relationships with people I started modeling with when I was 20. And most of those women have had a lot of insecurity. I mean, when you're in the modeling world, there's a lot of rejection.
Oh yeah.
Let's say on a weekly basis, I go to 5 go-sees, I go to 5 auditions. I'm most likely going to get maybe one of them. And then you go into the modeling agency and they weigh you and they measure you. And if your hair is not colored perfectly, then they send you home and all these things but you don't realize it when you're in that industry. You don't realize it's rejection. You just
Right.
think that's normal. And so it took me years and years to figure out that maybe that's not a very healthy way to live. And it's also obviously very transactional because, photographers would say to me, like, if you do this for me, if you work with this client, then I'll get you this client. And I thought that's kind of how life worked. And so that kind of insecurity, that kind of like a self criticism, I think it stemmed from my formative years as a child because,
So
you
tell
know,
me about that because I feel like there is more there that was not in the book.
well, I'm slowly figuring it out, but I think so I'm a mother, and I think my parents did the best job they could. They're very supportive of me. But when you're a mother, you make mistakes, right?
Of
And
course, yeah.
so when I was young, I would get a lot of my parents' friends or my friends or in school, people would say, "Oh, you're so pretty. You're so beautiful." And so I was like, "Okay, well, that's my thing. Like, I'm the pretty girl."
Mm,
And then when I wanted to be a model, my parents were like, "No, you've got 3 other sisters at home. We don't want, this kind of competition, or we don't want anybody to feel different." And so I felt shame about my beauty. And sometimes when people would say, "Oh my gosh, your daughter is so beautiful," then I would hear somebody say, "Yeah, but all of my daughters are beautiful." And so I was like, I felt kind of bad for being pretty.
wow. Okay, that's interesting.
And so
That
it was like I was getting accolades for being pretty, but then there was also this shame involved with it. And so I was kind of afraid to put myself further out into the modeling world because I was like, well, I don't want to make anybody feel bad, and I don't want to look for this excess attention. And so when I would get attention like it in the modeling world, or when I would leave a modeling shoot, and listen, I was 16, 17, 18 years old, and I'm 52. So, and I'm made up and I look beautiful, and people would say something to me on the street, I would be really insecure about that. I'd go home and I'd scrub my face from the makeup because I didn't want to be different, right? But I was in this industry that was
But
obviously,
being different is what gave you a career, right?
but I was like, it was very conflicting.
Yeah, that's the word. Yes,
It was
conflicted.
very
That's
conflicting.
yeah, and I mean, and you did such a good job of showing that. I'm glad you brought up shame because it's definitely here. But one thing you were very specific about was you were ashamed of the pick line that you had,
Yeah.
and and then, like many of my notes on your book, I wanted to know why. And does it, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Does it relate back to beauty, or tell me why were you ashamed of having a pick line?
I I was in a marriage. Well, listen, I chose my husband, right? We choose our mates. But I was in a
Sure.
marriage that resembled my childhood, which was if you yeah, well, let's put it this way. My ex-husband used to say to me all the time, you're a hypochondriac. And I would think to myself, I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer kind of late. If I was a hypochondriac, I would be at the doctor all the time. Like, isn't that the definition?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of confusing to me. But that's what I believed. Like, if he thought that, then that's what I was because I believed other people's opinions of me was more important than my opinion. And so there was this constant self criticism and constant self doubt that I think I carried from my childhood and also from the modeling industry, which is kind of, ingrained in the modeling industry.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to look back on your life like you have a marginalized perspective, right? But when you look back, like you have this perspective that you can kind of look at the whole package. And I could see that insecurity. I could see that self-doubt and those mistakes, but I couldn't correct it because I just thought that I was I was this kind of needy person. I was this hypochondriac. But in reality, I wasn't being needy. I was just being human. We all need people. We all need attention. I wasn't looking for extra attention,
Oh God, no, you
but
were
I was
not.
but I
Yeah.
was labeled as that.
Yeah. In fact, I want to make sure people, before I forget, one, if you are watching live and you have any comments or questions, please throw them. We'll see them. If they're on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube and cancer or YouTube and Facebook, we will not see the comments live. So, but if you have any questions for Christine, we will make sure you connect with her. But if you are watching, please throw in the comments on LinkedIn. We can see it. Um, so I want to make sure before I forget. So we will put a link to Christine's Instagram in the comments after this is over. But she does this amazing highlight of that time with just her arm. It's prior to the cancer. And you will see she's not a hypochondriac, like at all. um, so that actually leads very well into this is a direct line from your book about fighting and discord, neglect and disappointment. And but prior to going live, I asked, was this within your marriage? And you said yes. Could you tell us? There were definitely hints of it. You did a really good job of planting all these seeds and hints. Um, but I never like really knew, what was going on. So
Mhm.
well, let's do this because I'm divorced and I look back to what attracted you to your now ex-husband?
He was older and I was very mature. I mean, one of the things that I do now, I'm actually in school at Harvard. I'm getting my master's degree and I love
Awesome.
learning
Me
and
too.
I just I love having intellectual conversations. I don't do small talk at all. And so we had these interesting conversations and again, he was older, he was more mature. And I just was looking for somebody that was stable, somebody that was established. I could live the lifestyle that I had grown up with and not really to be dependent on I didn't believe that I could make a substantial income.
Mm,
I never believed that about myself. I believed that I was just going to go to school and get a good degree and then get married and have children. That's what I believed. And my modeling was like, it's cute and people liked it, but I always when I talked about my modeling career, people would be like, "Oh, she's just a model," and I ended up believing that I was just a model. And
mm.
people sometimes say that about moms. Oh, yeah, they're just a mom.
Ugh,
That's so insulting.
yeah,
I mean, modeling is hard.
yeah,
It's a huge commitment. It's a life. It's a life. It can be life changing. And same with motherhood. Like the motherhood is the hardest job in the world. And so it's dismissive. But I've learned all these emotionally abusive terms, right? And I can
Right.
label them now. I couldn't label them before. I just thought to myself, I'm just a model. I'm never going to make an income. I can't depend on my own salary. And so when you believe those things about yourself, you live that life. Like what you focus on, you become.
Right.
And so I became the wife, I became the mother, and I became the victim. I
Mm.
mean, as simple as that. I was used to being the victim. And that's how I lived my life. And when I was really up until my cancer diagnosis, I just thought people should take care of me. I just thought I'm that's what we're meant to do, is take care of each other. I didn't realize how much I needed to participate in that caring for each other. I had to take care of myself first. I had to be my biggest cheerleader, but I wasn't
Yeah.
cheering myself on at all. I was dependent on other people cheering me on. And if they weren't, then I felt really insecure and shame. I didn't realize it could all come from me.
Mm. Yeah.
It
Right.
should come from you.
Yeah, it should start there. It has to. It
But
has
we
to.
have to teach young women that.
Yeah.
We're not teaching them that. I mean, if you look around at billboards and TV and what we're
And
feeding our
social media.
souls for social media,
Yeah.
what we're feeding our souls is highlight reels and this fake
Yeah.
facade. That's dangerous, especially to women who are prone to being insecure or have self-esteem issues, which I did. I don't anymore, but I've learned, right? I got knocked against the wall with my arm. I got knocked against the wall with cancer, where I was like, okay, I I give up my pride. I give up my ego. I'm doing this wrong. How can I do this right?
Mm.
And fortunately for me, I had the grit and the grace and the determination to figure it out. But a lot of people who get diagnosis and get hit against the wall, they don't come out like I have come out, really, which is an unstoppable self-esteem. They come out more scathed
Right.
and have more fear in their life. I When I gave up the outcome, like worried about what other people think of me or worried about what would happen to me if I got another diagnosis or what would happen to me in my diagnosis, when I just lived for each day and showed up with courage, that was all I could really do.
Right. Oh, I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
But when we look at life like that, instead of looking at like, well, if I get through this chemo, what am I going to do? If I get through this divorce or if I get through this relationship, that's dependency. That's conditional. We can't live like that because it
Yeah.
can all be taken away tomorrow. I've seen that with my own life. It was all taken away.
Right.
And
Right.
when I had to rebuild it on faith. I had to rebuild it on God. I had to rebuild it on cheering myself on, because the platform that I had built before was sand. That dependency on society, that was sand. That was quicksand, actually.
So let's talk about that, because there definitely is an evolution in the book where I felt like at the beginning you weren't an atheist by any means.
Right.
Maybe agnostic is a better word. I felt like you believed in something, but maybe you weren't sure what it was. But many of your friends, we'll talk about them next, um, were very spiritual,
Yeah.
quite religious. I wasn't clear if you went to church or didn't, or went occasionally. Um, but this really changed. Your faith
Yeah.
changed. So can you tell us about how that happened, and can you tell us the story with the Post-it notes?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was really to show the transformation from
Mm.
living a very plastic, transactional life to living a life of faith and really a strong self-esteem. And and so my faith in the beginning was, I loved God. I knew who God was. I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic
Mm.
high school. I was like in Catholic girls' school my whole life.
Okay, wow. I think I missed that in the book.
Yeah, because I kind of moved away from. I didn't love that religious part of it.
Mm.
And there was a lot of shame involved, at least from my schooling. Not from home, but at school. And so in college and when I was first married and when I started to have these really good female friendships, my friends would say to me often, would you like to go to this Bible study with me? And if it interfered with my yoga class, then I wouldn't go. Like I was putting my faith in, again, like working on my body, not on my faith.
Yeah.
Working on my looks, not on my faith. And that became that stronghold in my life. And so and that went on for years. And I look back and I'm like, oh, that was so obvious. Like my stronghold was so obvious to most obviously to my friends, but I didn't see it.
Yeah.
And so when I was sick, first with my arm, and then I was sick with cancer diagnosis, and I started to go, well, gosh, this isn't really working for me. I can't go to yoga anymore. I have a fused arm. I can't do yoga at all. And I probably should start going to these Bible studies. There might be a different way to live. And so I started to, listen to my friends, and they were like, you're such a good student because you're so malleable with this faith thing. And I loved hearing about the scriptures because that was the only stronghold I could cling to, because everything else I clung to was a mistake.
Mm.
And so when I started to say to myself, like, let go and let God, that gave me permission to kind of let go of my pride and my ego. And so it was self-talk. It was changing what I was listening to, like podcasts. I went from listening to podcasts about celebrities to listening to faith-based podcasts. I turned off e-news because I was addicted to e-news. I just wanted to see what all the celebrities were doing and what they were wearing and all the Met Gala stuff. And now I look at the Met Gala and I'm like, oh my gosh, like if that stuff was important, it would be so easy to live, right? All you have to do is get a really beautiful dress and put on really great makeup, and how easy that would be, but that's not true.
Right.
And so when my faith shifted, and I had a friend who, the story is a very popular story in my book, but went to chemo, and I had 28 rounds of chemo. And so I was on probably 13 or 14, and I was really, really sick. And so this particular chemo, I came home and I had my father on one side of my body and I had my mother on the other, and they were kind of not carrying me, but really helping me walk into my house.
Yeah.
And when you're at chemo, for me, I was there all day, like 8 hours. And so I was walking into my house and I kind of was looking around, and there were these yellow sticky notes. They were on my bathroom window. I mean, they were on windows, they were in drawers, they were on countertops, they were in my kids' rooms. And I was looking around going, where did all these come from? And I would say to my parents, I was like, get me closer to these. And so they walked me closer, and all over my house were scriptures. Like these Post-it notes there were 250 of them in my house.
It's amazing.
And so everywhere I looked, I was looking at scripture, not society.
Mhm.
And that changed my focus as well. That was kind of a paradigm shift inside of me. And hopefully for my children, because I was so dependent on things like bags and gifts and gifting, right? If I give you this, will you love me? If I get this, it means he loves me. And when I just released all of that, and I was pouring into like looking at the scriptures, that was more important to me than turning on e-news, then I knew that I was changing. And then I knew I had a story to tell, because maybe if I could do that, other people would be in less pain, right? When we get disappointed by life or disappointed by a diagnosis or disappointed by society, maybe I could help other people not feel as bad or not have the crush that I felt.
I want to share with you just real quickly. I don't know who this person is, but they said amen. So
Well, again, it's so easy to look around because what our society is feeding us is one like focus. But we
so
have to really look inside and go, what do we want to focus on?
so we have to talk about your angels. One of your angels was the one who did all the sticky notes. And this was something I shared before we went live, but I was just blown away by your friends, your family too, definitely your parents, but your friends were just remarkable to
Mm,
me. And yet you still had this fear of not trusting people to show up.
right.
And yet they kept showing up.
Yeah.
So again, I felt like it was sort of this dichotomy of how can she not trust people to show up when these people have consistently shown up and in a way that I think is just incredible, because I think in many ways your book is also a sort of a love letter to your friends.
Yeah. People
It's
say
just
that all the time. Yeah.
yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was because I wanted to show what real female relationships can look like. And they certainly can sustain you. So when I was like at my worst and feeling like just total despair, they said, "We will carry you until you can carry yourself."
Mm.
And that was and I really took that as a responsibility. Like when they set me free and I could carry myself, I was now able to help other people. But they did show up. They were consistently showing up, and I didn't believe that they would, especially when I was first diagnosed with cancer, because they had just helped me for an entire year of my life with my arm, and I thought I've used up all my tokens with my family and my friends. Like I cannot ask them for any more, and that's just this insecurity, this deep
Mm.
insecurity that people will not show up.
Where does that come from? Because that happened prior to your friends.
I just think it's that kind of insecurity that I had as a child where it was like, is my beauty acceptable? Should I feel shame about it? It's this constant conflict in my life. Am I good
Mhm.
enough? Am I asking for too much attention? Am I is do I want to be a model because I'm looking for attention? And it was all this kind of like questions I was been asking myself for years instead of just saying, you know what? I was born pretty and I want to model and that's what I want to do and I can be successful at it. That's a
Yeah.
totally different mentality than the way I was doing it.
Yeah.
And so I was just like I was okay with crumbs from people because that's not all I thought I deserved.
Mm.
And so if like my husband was giving me crumbs, I'd be like, "Oh, thank you so much." Like where does that right, that's pathetic. And then I would tell myself that's pathetic, right? And so there was this constant like self-talk that was not helping me. It was harming me. And so when my friends started to show up a lot, I was like, I don't deserve this. And then
Mm.
ultimately when they kept showing up, I was like, I do deserve this.
Good.
Everybody deserves,
Everyone deserves it. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I think I needed the 30 people to show up for me to go, this is safe. I needed that extreme. And maybe it wasn't really just for me, right? Maybe it was because of the book. Maybe it was because of my story that it needed to tell, that I needed that many people to get me through. And it's such a beautiful a beautiful narrative of how women should cheer each other on because listen, I mean, going back to society, it's so easy to look around and go, well, we can gossip about her, we can compare our life to that, we can
Oh,
her, we can do this. And it's like, but why?
yeah.
That's
I
that comes from a heart that is that's your heart, right?
Yeah, I want to say something you said about them. My circle of angels looking out for me, I felt enwreathed by their affection, their attention, their tenderness, and love. I mean, yeah, it really felt like such a love letter. And since you mentioned him, I'm going there. Um, the contrast being your husband.
Yeah.
And so, if you don't mind, could you just give us, maybe one example, one story of how he really was the polar opposite from your friends.
Yeah, well, so one time my friends were over, and like when I say I was really sick, there were times where I wasn't sure I was going to wake up the next day.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was scheduling chemos between arm surgeries and mastectomies, and I mean, there was a lot that was wrong at one time.
Yeah.
And I was trying to take care of my kids, which was almost impossible because I was hard to take care of myself. And so a bunch of my friends were over one night, and I one I didn't want to eat, and two it was really hard to eat because I had a huge cast on my arm, my right arm, my dominant arm. And my one of my girlfriends went over to my husband and she was like, "Gosh, she's just so sick. I'm so worried about her." And my husband goes, "She's a grown woman, and you guys are feeding her. Like, why?" And my friend was so mad. She was like, my friend said to him, she goes, "Because she needs us to feed her."
Mm.
And it was like, and she didn't tell me that story till much later, but it was almost like he was jealous of the attention I was getting because it was easy for him to push me down. I was under his wing for so long. He didn't like me blossoming. Like to come out of that insecurity, that was a threat to our relationship.
Oh God, absolutely.
Which ultimately destroyed our relationship, right? Me
Yeah.
having a voice, me saying, "No, no, I'm not going to take scraps anymore. I deserve more." That ultimately destroyed our relationship. I wasn't that person anymore.
Okay, so you just gave me some deep insight into something there I think I put a note on as well.
Yeah.
Um, so you had this realization where you did not want people talking about your illness. You were especially at the very beginning, and this was with the cancer diagnosis. But you have this great point where you say they were suffering too, they meaning your friends, they needed to talk about it, and I wasn't allowing that. Pure speculation. Is part of the reason you weren't allowing that related to the relationship you had with your husband?
It was my relationship to myself. I felt shame. Like when I was a child and my parents had a friend that had cancer, they would say, "Oh, so and so was diagnosed with cancer." And
Mm,
it was like the scarlet letter, right?
wow.
And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, I was like, "Oh my god, I have cancer." Like it's a scarlet
Mm.
letter. And so I felt shame. I was embarrassed.
By something that
Yeah.
you did not control, that you had no control over.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Since you brought them up a couple of times now, w what did your parents think of your book? Did they read it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think my parents were really proud of me. It's my book was the first thing I did after my diagnosis that gave me a platform to speak about my story.
Right.
And my story is not self-serving. I didn't write that book for flattery. It's not flattering. And talking about the vulnerability that we're talking about, this is not flattering about who I was for 41 years. But it's important because my goal is not to have a my goal is to have a bigger voice for sure because I can help people. I can show courage under great suffering, but my goal is not to get my name out in lights. My goal is to help other women not feel so bad. As bad as I felt, I was like, I will do anything to cover these people from getting to that point of despair.
Mm.
And so if however I can do that. And so this was like my first point of, inflection is to try to get this story out. And
Oh,
then
can you show the cover?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so people can see it. Yeah, it's a great cover. And I wanna share this as well. So you are making a difference. Thank you for sharing your story. I think a lot of us go through these struggles, but we hide it from the outside world and even those we care about. I've always struggled with asking for help. I've never felt good enough until recently. Your story warms my heart. Keep on sharing. You have no idea how your story will change lives. And thank you so much to that viewer that shared that with us.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. I had plastic surgery a week ago, 1 week ago.
Yes, yes, and you put this on Instagram. I
And
was like,
I just got my stitches out literally an hour ago. I'm like, my plastic surgeon's like, "You have an interview in an hour?" I'm like, "Yeah, I gotta hurry up." He was like, "You cannot wear eye makeup." I was like, "It's no problem. Like, this isn't." I've had 23 non-elective surgeries,
ugh,
and I'm 52 years old. I'm like an open book. I talk about everything. And I'm like, people were saying to me, like, "Oh, you're so vocal about your plastic surgery." I was like, "I'm not ashamed of my plastic surgery." I'm like patting myself on the shoulder, going, "It's about time you did something for yourself." Like,
that you chose to do.
I mean, for the past 6 years, I've been like, I was trying to change everybody else's life. Like, how about a little bit of something for me? And so I'm really proud of myself for doing it and taking the time to do it. But I'm not like ashamed of anything in my life. I'm not ashamed of my book. I'm not ashamed of the story that I tell. I'm not ashamed of calling out people or things or myself because if we live in that shame, we're not helping anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanna share with you, and maybe you saw this in my comments, I don't think so, but at first, and just for people watching this, so I had already interviewed Christine for our Share Your Story for the Cancer Youth Thriver podcast, and that is already a workshop for our members, and it's gonna be a podcast episode in the future. So I already had a feeling of who she was, and then I read your book, and I felt, especially at the beginning, like this was a totally different person than the person I had just interviewed, and
Uh,
I could not relate.
mm,
Like, I could not relate at all. I was sort of dumbstruck by it that I was like, "Wow," like,
I love.
I've never lived in this world. I've never even owned 1 house, much less 2 or 3. But then, 1, I told myself to stop being so fucking judgmental. Okay, there's that one. 2, but then I really saw how open you were about, yes, this was my life. I liked having money and this is why. And I
Mm,
totally agree. Wealth gives you security. That's what it does.
Yeah.
and or at least it can make you feel secure.
Yeah.
And but then I just saw how open you were being about all of it, and I thank you so much because, and I want to tell people um, to not be. I don't know anyone would be put off by your book, but there's always a critic, man. There's always a critic. So,
I don't care.
um, but I really want people, encourage people to read it all the way through because there is this incredible narrative arc that
Yeah.
happens.
Thank you.
And
That's a
yeah, yeah,
compliment.
that really opens you up. And just because someone has money, and they don't have to worry about sort of paying their bills, it doesn't mean there aren't all these other things going on. And so you talk very early on, and I'm mad at myself for not highlighting more. You talk about your fear of abandonment
Mhm.
really early. And of course, I just put,
Wow.
why, but I didn't. You said this was when it began. And so when did that fear of abandonment begin? Because that is hard to reconcile a little bit with the parents who were, there at least in your adulthood. So where did that start?
I mean, I think the fear of abandonment comes from myself. Like, I think it is this deep insecurity that I was never enough. And I could never accomplish enough. Like, again, I was just the model. I was just a mother. And I think it's this deep lack of self-esteem. And when you don't feel good about yourself, you make bad decisions. And
Yeah.
so I mean, clearly I picked somebody who was gonna forsake me. Like, I picked the perfect person to fill that fear of abandonment. Like,
Yeah.
that was my decision making. And so I think that if you are insecure, like I was deeply insecure, not realizing how deeply insecure I was, and you have a troubled self-esteem, if you don't do the work to fix it, then you will always have this abandonment issue, like this deep loneliness, and maybe you don't know where it comes from. I don't necessarily know where it comes from, but I know that has existed for as long as I can remember. But the only person that can fix that, you can't blame. You have to just unpack it, and you have to dump that backpack of blame and just go, okay, this is what's happening. This is what happened in my life. I have to fill that back up with something. I'm not going to fill it with loneliness. I'm not going to fill it with bad decision making. I'm going to fill it with learning how to develop a bigger self esteem. And that's how I changed. That's how I changed it. Like, you talk about, like, you judging. I don't judge anything because I went through this. I used to be very judgmental, but no, like even this interview, like, maybe people would notice that I had stitches here and I have staples in my head right now.
Yeah, I know. Can't tell at all.
And so it's like, how do we even know? We don't know how somebody feels. Like, we
Right.
don't know their background. We don't know how they feel right now. I have to get a PET scan on Friday because my cancer doctor there's an issue in my somewhere, and she's like, I need to rule out cancer. I'm not sharing that, but I mean, I have a little bit of fear of it. But you don't know how somebody's walking through life. You don't know how, like,
Yeah.
somebody's
Yeah.
walking down the
No
street
idea.
today, they could have just been diagnosed with cancer yesterday, and you won't know that.
Yeah.
So if they're, like, rude, or they're unhappy, or they're, kind of snarly at you, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
it's their heart. Let them have their heart, and you don't know what's going inside of them. And most people don't talk about this stuff. And so how can we judge anybody? We can't. And so when people come after me on social media, or they say, like, negative things, it's like it just, like, washes over me. I don't even think about it.
Good for you.
I
Good for you.
I have no I don't carry that for 1 second. And
Good for you.
that's freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That is freedom. Yeah.
But you have
Uh,
to work on your self-esteem. The only way that you can change that is from working on your self-esteem.
I think it was Gloria Steinem who said that self-esteem isn't everything, but without it, you have nothing, which is,
I made the worst decisions of my life when I had a low self-esteem.
like what, for example?
Picked the wrong partner.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go to the Bible studies. I went to yoga class. I was dependent on society. Like, society doesn't give a shit about me. Why would they care about me?
I didn't have this in our stack of questions, but I am curious. I know you'd made a lot of changes in your book to protect your children, primarily, and you do say that in here. I'm going to find it because it was so good.
Thank you.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm gonna find it. Ah, okay. It was something about how you had taught your kids how to be entitled their whole
Material.
lot their
Yeah.
whole lives, which I felt again was so honest. Um, how has going through this with you changed them? Because they were both teenagers, right? Preteen teenagers when this started with your arm?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, I really did teach him that, and that's not on my ex-husband, that was totally me. Because I was so insecure, like, I needed those things, like, I thought I needed those things. I needed the
Right.
right address, I needed the blonde hair, I needed the purse, I needed the right bag, I needed to go get the newest bag because of that insecurity, and so I showed that to my kids, like, I gifted them these crazy, stupid things because I was like, "Well, they need that," like, and then, when I went through all this, I was like, "Gosh, guys, I really made a mistake. I taught you wrong." And so I'm trying
Mm,
to teach them differently. And well, of course, how I live my life is completely different. And so they see that I'm modeling that.
right.
But these are ingrained things, right? And so, but my kids have made shifts in that. They still like the stuff, and again, that's totally my fault. But I see them making shifts. Like one of my sons just changed his life pretty dramatically. He was drinking a little bit too much, and he is now completely sober, and he's following faith like really religiously right now. And I'm like so proud of him. He's 21, and he's
Oh,
decided that he's going to live a sober life, and he's following God. And I'm like, okay, this is my son. Like, I hope I've had something to do with it, but that's egotistical as well. Like, I don't, it's not about me. It's about, he has his own life and he's making his own decisions. I just have to try to correct what I put on him, because I put that on my children.
yeah.
And so I think they're shifting, but the only way I can really make a difference in their lives is how I model my life, how I live my
Oh,
life.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
How do you
And
live?
you now in the book, you have a son and daughter, but you have 2 sons?
I have two sons.
Okay, so I'm gonna do a little confession.
Yeah.
So, when I started going through your Instagram, um, and this is one of the things I love about Instagram because it's just so easy, I was like, "Where is the daughter? Like, where is she? Oh my gosh, like, did they not repair their relationship?" And then I realized, okay, perhaps she
Mhm.
has I believed you had 2 children, like, I felt like that rang very true, and I said, "Perhaps it's actually 2 sons," because I kept seeing sons.
Yeah. It's a little bit confusing. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I love my book. I often read my own book. When I feel less courageous in my life, I actually read my own book.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. I didn't read my book, like, as a reader, no longer proofreading, for over a year after it came out. I did not read it, and then I read it, and I had a hard time reading my own book.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was a little crushing. So, um, yeah, I do wanna share something, kind of on a lighter note, but
Mm,
I know my sister resonated with this. So you talked about how you did not like being stuck with sick people.
mm,
And I thought that was interesting because my sister 100% felt the same way. She got really upset when I took her to this teen support group for teens with cancer. And that's when I realized I was the one looking for support as a
mm.
parent. I was the one that needed it. It wasn't her at all. And she
Yeah,
felt the same way.
yeah.
So I think it's interesting that you often felt isolated among people. But then when you were among people who were going through something similar, you didn't want to be stuck with them.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's been years since I felt like that, and I've been sick since then. I had a MRSA infection in 2020.
Oh my goodness.
I was in the hospital 3 times during March of 2020, so right at the beginning of the pandemic. I was there for 5 days. I got a PICC line. I was in the hospital 5 days in April 2020 when nobody was there. I was like, there were 7 people on my floor. I was in the hospital with major surgery June of 2020,
Oh my goodness.
completely isolated because I had a MRSA infection in my chest. And I think that being with sick people at that point was like, I just knew it so well. And I wanted, even, this is so funny. When I was in the hospital of March of 2020, there were literally 7 people on the floor
Isn't that crazy?
because they'd canceled all surgeries. Like,
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah.
I was there. The world shut down March 15th. I was there March 25th. Even when I went to the emergency room, because my oncologist said, you got to get to the emergency room, I had this massive infection in my chest. The person at the emergency room was like, you can't come in. I was like, well, my oncologist is in there and she
Yeah.
made me come. I don't want to be here. And then they admitted me and kept me for 5 days. And I kept saying to them, can you just send me home? And they were like, no, you're really sick. And I would go around that hospital floor because at that time they hadn't put masks on us yet. It was only gloves. And I'd take my IV bag in my hospital gown and I would walk around the floor to those 7 patients and I would knock on their door every day. And
Oh,
I would be like, if I'm feeling lonely, I know you are. How can I help you? Do you want to talk? Can I serve you in any way? Can I get you anything? And so I would just walk around that hall all day long and just help people. And so, and then I ended up going to the hospital a month later for the same infection that didn't go away. And I went again, they put me on that same floor. And one of the nurses, I checked in at like midnight that time. One of the nurses said to me, you were that girl that used to walk around the floor and you helped so many people. She's like, we're going to give you this suite that overlooks the ocean.
oh,
Because, and I was like, I didn't do it for people. I didn't even notice that people were watching.
right.
You have no idea how people are watching kindness, right?
Yeah.
And so I look back in that and like I was immersed with sick people and I loved it because I knew I could help them
Mm.
because I understood and I had this major compassion for people that were sick. But back then, again, it was like this shame, this whole shame of being sick and not feeling comfortable in that. If you've been sick in your life, you have to build a home in that sickness.
Yeah,
Your
me
home
too.
changes.
Yeah.
And it's like if you don't build a home in that sickness, you're never going to feel comfortable. And so like post sickness, I've had to build a home in that and that looks different. So you have to these seasons of your life will change, but if you're not planted in those seasons, you can feel like an orphan and that's really dangerous. And so like
Mhm.
being around sick people right now and I mentor a ton of people. I love being in that space because I know how it feels. So it's really interesting that you brought that up. I don't even remember that feeling anymore.
Wow. So I want to ask because I feel like there's another book coming. What are 3 major changes that have happened from where the book ends? And I'm trying to remember at the very end, I think you'd gone through chemo.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, but it was, yeah, toward the end. So what are some 3 major changes that have happened in your life since then?
So one major change was I had breast implants after my chemotherapy and my mastectomies, and I really loved them. On some level, I thought it was kind of the prize of, you go through breast cancer, you lose your breast, but look at these pretty, they don't move, they're like perfect
They're
size,
always perky.
perky, and they look great in clothes. And this infection I got in March of 2020 was in my implant. And so
Ugh,
after months of trying to get rid of the infection, they had to excavate my chest. And so I have a concave chest. So that was a major emotional road
yes.
and very isolating because it was during COVID and we couldn't be with anybody.
Mm,
And so that was probably the biggest change in my life. But since then, my modeling career has kind of like skyrocketed because I walked in New York Fashion Week in February with a concave chest, like in 4 shows. And I'm not a runway model. I mean, I guess now I would be considered one, but I was always a print model. And then my manager reached out to brands and said, you know what, Christine Handy's a lifetime model. She wants to walk in shows to show, bravery and courage to breast cancer survivors
right.
who feel kind of less than because they don't have a chest anymore. And I can't tell you the impact it's had.
Mm,
And so I would say my modeling career has kind of skyrocketed. My breasts obviously have my chest has changed dramatically, and I've moved. Like I live in Miami now. I moved away from a toxic relationship, and I live a very independent life. And really, my focus is on helping other people. And so, yeah, I think everything's really changed.
yeah, a lot of changes. A
Yeah,
lot
physical
of
and emotional.
yeah, yeah. Oh, well, good for you. You just reminded me, and please take this as a compliment. I'm watching the First Lady series. I think it's on Showtime, and it has 3 different first ladies. And gosh, Betty Ford.
Mm,
Betty Ford, when she was pretty sure she had a cancer diagnosis, she had just had a mammogram and was about to have a biopsy. She made it public, and
mm,
the White House did not want her to do that, and her husband didn't say anything apparently, but, because she was, very lively, but she said, "No, I need to tell people," and they were
mm,
like, you should wait. You gotta wait." Like, the whole press secretary was like, "No, you gotta wait till you have an actual diagnosis." She's like, "We know what this is."
mm,
And I never would have gotten a mammogram if I hadn't just been there to go along with my friend to support her. Like, she
mm.
didn't have a mammogram scheduled or anything. So, and she did that, and mammograms increased sixfold
Wow.
in just like a month or two.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's vulnerability and storytelling that can really change people's lives.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. All right. People want to get in touch with you. What's the best way? And again, if you are watching this later, which almost always happens, you're going to have to tag Christine, or she's going to tell you right now the best way to get in touch with her, because otherwise she's not going to see any comments you made after the live is over. So, how can people get in touch with you?
I think the best way is Instagram. My Instagram handle is Christine Handy One. The reason it's Christine Handy One is because somebody already had Christine Handy when I went on Instagram.
No.
Yeah. Which by the way, she's reached out to me many times. She's like, "Thank you so much for all you do." She's like, "Because I get followers just from people googling you." She's a super nice woman. Um, I don't respond much on Facebook. My assistant sometimes do, but I've had so many Facebook people like who will comment or not comment, but they'll DM me on Facebook and they'll go, "Why aren't you responding? You know, what W2F?" And I'm like, really? Like, I
Yeah.
can't respond to everything. And
Oh, yeah.
so I pick my battles. I respond on Instagram. I do Pinterest a lot. I love Pinterest. It's a great platform, but you don't have a lot of comments there. But and also my website. I have a good website. It shows you a ton of my interviews and a
Yeah,
ton of
you do.
stories on my website.
It's
And
just
just
christinehandy.com, is that right? Yeah,
mhm.
yeah, it's great. It is a fantastic website. So, and I never say that about any website. That's really good. Um, and where else? So Instagram. Wait,
I'm on
what do you use
Facebook. I'm on
Pinterest for?
LinkedIn.
What?
So I have a woman that helps me repurpose I do a lot of interviews and she takes the interviews and makes them into clips and she puts them on Pinterest. I think this is no exaggeration. I think I have like 90,000 views on one of my little 1-minute clips.
What?
90,000 views.
Okay, I'm gonna look this up because I have stayed away from Pinterest
I
because it's
love
like a rabbit hole I never wanted to go down because I knew I could
get on it.
spend.
Get
Yeah,
on it.
okay, but I didn't know you could do that. So that's
You can
pretty
have
fun.
you can have a huge reach on Pinterest. Like again, this is not self-serving. I'm not like looking for my name and lights. I'm looking to help other people. And if I can help other people any way I can, then I want to repurpose this stuff and put it out there. And so I started Pinterest about a year ago. I wish I'd started earlier. And yeah, she just takes these videos and she posts it for me and I have a wide reach now on Pinterest.
Okay, I'm gonna look into that because everyone told me, as an author, that's a platform you should be on. It's,
Yeah,
and
Google my Pinterest and look at it.
yeah, I will. I will.
And then LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's such a professional site and I love it. And I'm on the board of two nonprofits. And so
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
I'm on the board of eBeauty, which is a wig exchange program for women going through treatment who can't afford a wig. We
Is
have
that ebeauty.com?
yeah,
Okay. All right.
we have
Okay.
partnered with L'Oreal who gives us grant money because our biggest expense is shipping these wigs out. And we've also partnered with Paul Mitchell Salons, who their schools wash and style these wigs for us, and then they
Wow.
ship them out from their salons. And so I was able to afford wigs when I was going through treatment, and my kids really wanted me to have a wig on. They wanted me to look as much as their mom, like as their mom's possible. And
Oh, I think I missed that part in your book. I didn't know that.
oh my gosh, do we have time for a very short story?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember the scene and trying on the wigs, but I didn't realize that it was something your kids wanted.
Maybe I didn't put it in the story, but my son one day my mom was like, "Oh, you should get a different color wig just to change it up. This is the only time in your life that you'll be able to do this, hopefully." And so I got a brunette wig. It was really short. It was cute, a little bob. And my younger son came home from school and he looked at me and he walked over to me and he was not nearly as tall as me then. Now he's six something.
Mm.
And he grabbed the wig from my head and he ripped it off and he threw it across the room. And he ran out of the room crying. And what I found out was he needed me to look like me.
Yeah.
And that was, that was traumatic enough for him to not know if his mother was going to survive. And he needed me to look like me. So that was the last time I actually donated that wig like the next day.
Did you?
So it's
Yeah.
just, this eBeauty is a free resource. It's free
Yeah.
for women who cannot afford a wig. And so I want to like shout this from the rooftops. So many people don't know about this. If anybody can reshare it, please do, because there's so many people that cannot afford this. And this is a free resource. We've redistributed over 70,000 wigs.
Wow.
We have a ton in our storage unit, tons.
Okay. All right. So what I will also do is put this in the comments of all the lives. So
Great.
I will put a link to your website, but also a link to eBeauty, and that way people can see it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Um, Christine, thank you so much for doing this interview. I just devoured your book, and I'm so excited to see what happens next, what the next book's going to be, but also the film as well.
Yeah, it's exciting.
All right. Well, if you want to get in touch with Christine, christinehandy.com. Please check out the nonprofit ebeauty.com. And if you do decide to leave a comment after, you must tag her, or please go to her website and connect with her. And check out her Instagram as well. Christine, thanks so much.